We've been getting tested and didn't even realize it.
Yeah, really?
Oh,
nice. Okay, good.
Of course.
There you go.
Okay, I will use that.
Yeah.
Good. There we go.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Follow-Up, where we recap this week's sermon so you can go deeper in your relationship with Jesus. I'm here with Pastor Adam and Pastor Jack. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yay, you're welcome. So, Adam, you're going to give us our 60-second recap today.
I am.
I think you can do it under 60.
I think I can do it. I'm feeling more confident now than I used to be. I used to be about a minute and a half or a 90-second guy. Now I think I can do 60.
I think you got this. Okay. We'll get started in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so this weekend, Pastor Jack and I looked at Galatians 3, 1 through 22, talking about being upstaged by faith, particularly verses 1 through 5, where faith, not works, is what brings salvation. Then in verses 6 through 14, how faith, not works, has always been the means of being made right in the eyes of God. And then wrapping it up 15 through 22, where we were looking at that salvation is a result of the promise, God's promise that was given to Abraham, and not the law, where it's always been about a belief, a trusting in the word, the character of God that brings about salvation, and that remains true for us today, particularly faith in Jesus.
Look I didn't even hear the timer go off, so you did great. Keep getting better and better, Adam. We love it.
Pretty soon we're going to have to cut it down to 30.
Ooh, I think Jack's already
Yeah,
got that.
Yeah. The Bible.
So I know that as we do 2 sermons, 2 different preaching pastors, it's fun to kind of see which different directions you guys take. So I know there were different things that you guys wanted to dive in a little bit deeper into. So now is your time. So Jack, do you want to dive in a little bit deeper?
First. Yeah, because it's really at the end of the chapter. As I was researching it, there's a lot of things that Paul leans into from a rabbinic type of argument. One of them was, it was very common for them to take a passage from the Old Testament or take a philosophy and boil down to one word, like to get the essence of it. And one of the things he does is that word seed, the blessing comes through Abraham's seed, not seeds, plural. It's not through a generation or a race. It's through a seed, a person, and that's Jesus. And to hone it in like that, to try and make sure everyone captured the idea in a single word. I love the communicator side of me loves something that can be that simple. I think is a win. And then the other one, which we were just talking about, was this idea of a law, which has a lawgiver and a law follower, requires 2, a covenant. And then there's a promise. A promise comes from one person. And Paul says, and God is one. And his point there is, God's made the promise. Like what we do, it's not a contingent promise, it's a promise. So if he's promised to do something, if I promise you I will have you a check to buy whatever from you, that promises I will be there. Now whether you're there or not, I'll be there. If you've had a good day or bad day, I'll be there. If you want to do something beforehand, that's on you. I'll be there. I will fulfill my part of the promise. He says God is one. He's fulfilled his promise. So the picture of that for me from a historical context and a communication context, I just think it's so cool.
Yeah, it was being in the audience watching that. It was like I could sense like light bulbs going off on people's heads of like, oh, okay, I can distinctly tell the difference of doing things based out of a law because there's like that transactional piece to it rather than just being this is what I'm promising to you, and it's more of a gift.
It is.
And I didn't have to do anything to earn it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam.
Not so much. Well, I guess I would say, what I left out exactly what Jack was talking about the mediator aspect in chapter 3, that last section, 15 through 22. I didn't go into that as much, but I was almost going to turn this back around, you guys. I'm kind of changing the follow-up here a little bit. Why do you think that we have a tendency to go back to the law so much?
Oh, the law is phenomenal for creating comfort zones and comfort boxes. Why should I function in an area of ambiguity, or well, what if God, or what if you're not doing what I want? It's so much easier to create a box. I can live in this box because I'm really comfortable, and now I can force you into my box. And we see that in a Pharisaical mindset, which is a lot of what happened. They may have thought they were doing a favor by creating more laws. Now you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
But it created a comfort zone in a box that the Pharisees could say, we're doing it all, which they weren't. But they could say they're doing it all, and now I can hold you to a higher standard.
Right.
So I think there's just such a place of appeasement for what their establishment was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that even throughout Bible history, like after the exile, and they rebuild the wall, and Nehemiah has done so much as part of that, and people are like, "Yeah, we're going to hold to God. We're gonna do this." And by the end of the book, they've already lost it. And so many times for us, we think like, man, I've been through some deep waters. I've learned my lesson. Now I'm going to do this. And now I'm going to, I have it all figured out. And there's this tendency where we can rely on our own ability to follow God, our own ability to follow through. And it's the reminder that it's only through Jesus who's done all of it. Yeah, obedience is important, but obedience comes from receiving God's grace and not in order to receive his grace. And that whole aspect of how love for God then shapes everything and not law.
And that's one of the beauties of Galatians is don't start with law and hope to bump into Jesus.
Right.
Start with Jesus and let your love for him guide your life.
Right.
And last week, actually, when we were talking about this, I love Garrett's question. I'm a Christian. Now what do I do? Like within the rules, I know rules to follow. But if you take away my rules and the goal is to follow Jesus, it's like a first date that I don't know what to do on a first date. So that's why I think the comfort zone is a big piece of it. But we're looking for something we can get right, instead of a relationship to get right.
Right.
And it's easier just to check boxes than to actually care about a person. Like what do they want?
Right. Well, and I think it was totally a great example of that yesterday. How many people had rules as far as what they had to do for Mother's Day?
Oh, yeah.
Like you must get a card, you must get a gift, you must make them dinner or take them out. No, you did things out of a love for that person. So some people might have made their card. Some people might have gotten them flowers, might not have gotten them flowers. Some might have taken the kids out of the house for the day or whatever. They might not have. But there wasn't a law to that. It was out of a love and knowing the person and doing something that they knew that woman would appreciate. And the difference between love and law, that law cannot foster love. Law cannot bring about new life. It cannot make love. It can't make you appreciate the other person. And I think that's what we're seeing through Galatians 3, where they had gotten their view skewed as far as taking the message of Jesus, but then adding all this other stuff on it. He's like, and that's where we both talked about as far as, man, who's bewitched you? How did you get so far off from just the simple message of the cross that saves? So anyhow, I didn't really answer that question very well, Carrie. But
we got great conversation. Great conversation going. So as we were talking about a next step from this, we've kind of talked about a few different things, but if you could hone in, specifically for you, Adam, hone in on one specific thing of a next step somebody could take after listening to this, what would it be?
Yeah, I think a big step is just surrender of a confession of sin. So sometimes when we've blown it and we feel like, oh man, I don't feel clean, I need to make this up to God. And we make these promises. Here's the next thing. God, I promise because of this, I'll do all these things. I'm going to be in the Bible every day this week for an hour. We make these promises to try to feel clean. And I would say, again, it comes back to the simple aspect of receiving God's grace, of belief, believing what God has done, believing in the finished work of Jesus to cleanse us. And so, again, to first of all, to confess our sin, turn from our sin, and celebrate forgiveness right where we're at. Yeah. Not when we feel forgiven, not when we feel we've done our penance, but right where we're at, that we can have the slate completely wiped clean.
I love that so much. Jack, do you have anything else you want to add?
I had a pastor one time lay out a challenge. He said, tell me one person in the Bible that God said, you either have too much faith in me or you love me too much. I was like, man. So then we go to, once again, Paul, the Jewish history was, if you wanted to look at a person who was like the embodiment of faith, it was Abraham. Abraham, he wasn't a perfect person. He was far from that. But he believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. He's the father of faith. There's so much without faith that's impossible to please God. So the question for me, even as I was going through this, is my life a life of faith or pragmatic Christianity? Like, is there something to this that says, no, I'm believing for God for a bigger next step?
Yeah.
And is everything going right? No. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. We all know that. But man, that doesn't mean I stop believing in the Lord or stop loving him and trusting him. I got to get back up, and I've got to choose to take the next step to following him again. But I do. I believe in a big God, and I believe that there's things he's called us to. And it's like, am I going to take a step of faith in this?
And Carrie, if I can add one more,
Of course.
okay? Because I think sometimes we don't necessarily have the danger of, we're adding something on top of the gospel in order to be saved. But there's things that can distract us from the gospel.
Right.
So I know even for me, the times if I've been on my Twitter feed too long and I'm seeing all the junk that's happening in the world, and I'm losing sight of the hope that comes in the gospel because I'm basing it on the news that I'm seeing and all the different videos and things. And so maybe for some people listening, they're in the same boat as well, where it's like, hey, what has bewitched you? You know, what is distracting you from the clarity and the good news of Jesus, that you're starting to look at all these other things instead of just the simple grace of God that's offered right where you're at.
So many different things that we can just like hold on to from this series. So I'm so excited that we're going through this book. We will see you guys in the next episode of Follow Up.